Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show for Tuesday, April the 6th, 2021. I see that White House Press Secretary Jen, not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, says Joe Biden needs Americans to stop living their lives again and just sacrifice a little bit longer. Yeah, let's see how long they can pull that one off for. I do have some good news on this front. It's good news, but it's also infuriating. But here we go. So that is so often the case these days. This is from Alexander Nazarian at Yahoo News. End the hygiene theater, CDC says. It's time to unplug the sanitizing robots and put away the bottles of Clorox that seem to line the entrances to every school, restaurant, and supermarket, wanting to advertise its safety protocols. While such protocols may be reassuring to an anxious populace, they are not necessary, says a revised guidance issued on Monday by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Quote, it is possible for people to be infected through contact with contaminated surfaces or objects, fomites, but the risk is generally considered to be low, unquote. The new CDC guidance says estimating the chance of contracting the coronavirus through surface transmission is lower than 1 in 10,000. The coronavirus is spread almost exclusively by airborne and aerosolized particles, as scientists have known for months. Despite scientists' growing certitude about how the pathogen is transmitted, many establishments have continued to insist on strict sanitation protocols. In some school districts, for example, classrooms close for full-day deep cleaning. The persistence of such practices has led to the advent of a derisive term, hygiene theater, to describe rituals that appear to do little to stop the virus from spreading. It is not clear if the CDC's new guidance will lower the curtain on those theatrics, given how entrenched some of those practices have become. If we took half the effort that's being given to disinfection and we put it on ventilation, that would be huge, said University of Colorado atmospheric chemist Jose Luis Jimenez in Nature. Scientists' changing understanding of the virus has made it difficult for public health experts and elected officials to offer the public consistent advice. For example, when the pandemic began, Americans were told that face masks were not necessary. That guidance was later amended after it became clear that masks kept a sick person from spreading the disease. Still later, scientists acknowledged that masks also protected the wearer. The Biden administration has continued to ask people to wear face masks, but months of confusion and contradiction have likely attenuated the impact of that message. The science regarding fomites has followed a similar route. At first, the World Health Organization said the coronavirus was not airborne, but instead was transmitted primarily through respiratory droplets and contact routes, a mistaken assertion that has been criticized since it was made in March 2020. Hygiene theater. And who was it who was responsible for this hygiene theater? Do you remember being told about a year ago that COVID-19 could live on surfaces for up to 9 days, which led to the routine of people washing their hands 10, 20, 30, 40 times a day because of the terror that touching anything would lead to their death. Well, now we know that this is not true. And in fact, this has been known for months. But for some reason, this information was pretty much suppressed. Back to Yahoo. It was around that time that the U.S. saw surging demand for heavy-duty disinfectants that would kill any trace of virus on a surface. But as researchers have discovered, such traces are usually relatively small and have a difficult time finding a new human host. What's more, simple cleaning agents appear to be effective against the virus, obviating the need for more advanced and expensive disinfectants. In most situations, cleaning surfaces using soap or detergent and not disinfecting is enough to reduce risk, says the new guidance, which was introduced by Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the CDC director, on Monday. Yes, this was the woman who was about to burst into tears. What was it, last week? Because she was so scared and that America was facing doom. Just to recap, experts, scientists told us to be afraid of everything in the world, as well as every person in the world, because if we touched anything, we had to rush to wash our hands lest we succumb to the corona doom. And it turns out that was never true. This is from Tom Elliott on Twitter. Dr. Fauci on Texas COVID cases dropping despite ignoring his advice on masks and social distancing. Quote, "It can be confusing because often you have to wait a few weeks before you see the effect. I'm not really quite sure. It could be they're doing things outdoors," unquote. He follows up. Despite the failure of his forecast a month ago that Texas dropping its COVID restrictions would be disastrous, Fauci's now warning last night's Texas Rangers game could spark another COVID wave. Meanwhile, in Germany, well, I suppose this shouldn't really be a surprise. This is from Oliver Lane at Breitbart. The new chairman of Germany's ruling Christian Democratic Union, who may yet replace Angela Merkel as chancellor, has called for the nation to enter an even deeper lockdown as it battles with low rates of vaccination and coronavirus third wave. Armin Laschet, who is president of German state North Rhine-Westphalia, and since January the chairman of the nation's ruling CDU, argued for what he called a bridge lockdown Monday, saying present terms were not harsh enough. Using the metaphor of a bridge over troubled waters, Laschet fundamentally implied that lockdown needed to go deeper and longer until enough Germans were vaccinated to make coronavirus less of a threat to German society. This, in many respects, is no small ask. After months of failure at European and national level, Germany is well behind first world peers like the United Kingdom and United States in vaccination levels. Oh, breaking news. Chelsea Clinton launching podcast covering COVID-19 pandemic. Well, I suppose we can all hardly wait. It's a long piece from the Daily Mail. Why is Boris so scared? Tory MPs fury at never-ending lockdown based on worst-case SAGE projections of third wave despite jabs. Most likely scenario is that deaths will stay in double figures even with all restrictions lifted. The government was accused today of deploying Project Fear tactics and doomsday worst-case scenarios to justify prolonging coronavirus restrictions, despite the government's own predictions showing that any third wave of coronas this summer is likely to be manageable. A third wave of COVID, when restrictions are lifted in June, is likely, well, if they are lifted in June, is likely to be a small fraction of the size of previous peaks, and daily deaths will remain in double figures, according to the best projections from Number 10's scientists. Modeling by Imperial College London academics, including the notoriously gloomy Professor Lockdown, Neil Ferguson, show that daily deaths should stay below 100 in the event of an inevitable resurgence. And thanks to the effects of vaccines, the team's most likely scenario also estimated that coronavirus patients will take up 5,000 hospital beds during any future spike, far lower than the 30,000 occupied during the darkest days of January. Yes, but is that an excuse for letting go of the fear, of the panic? A great piece from Anil McCarthy at conservativewoman.co.uk. In my last piece for The Conservative Woman, I referred to Boris Johnson's neo-Cromwellian state in the context of his suppression of Christmas and Easter. Little did I expect that his centurions would be storming churches this Good Friday. And James Hartfield had tweeted, like the Roman centurions at Golgotha, police break up a Good Friday service in a Polish church in Balham. You may have seen the tweet from the Babylon Bee saying that Jesus Christ faced charges for violating his stay in tomb order. The 1970s Irish Republican song, The Men Behind the Wire, may not feature on the playlists of many readers, But a verse from it has not left my mind since I heard about what happened in Christ the King Polish Roman Catholic Church in Balham, South London, Friday evening. Round the world, the truth will echo. Cromwell's men are here again. England's name is sullied in the eyes of honest men. Yes, threatening parishioners with fines of £200 or even arrest. The author continues, the right to worship is inalienable. Under the Old English common law, a criminal who took refuge in a church could not be removed by the forces of the state. This was based on the idea, as English legal historian Ben Darlow has put it, that no force could be used on the consecrated and holy ground of the churches. What a searing incongruity it is to see such hallowed traditions monstrously profaned in a Western democracy. Aside from the eternal verities of the natural law, yes, when we hear about natural law or common law in Western countries, particularly England, one wonders whether they actually still exist. Even hard-bitten secularists should surely recoil at the brazen disregard that the Wandsworth police have shown for the secular law, both common and statutory, which governs these matters. Section 36 of the Offences Against the Person Act, 1861, makes it an offense punishable by up to 2 years in prison to obstruct or prevent or endeavor to obstruct or prevent, by threats or by force, any clergyman from celebrating divine service in any church, chapel, meeting house, or other place of divine worship. And in the case of Cole versus Police Constable, 1937, Lord Goddard stated that it was a common law right to attend one's own parish church. For those who take the European Convention on Human Rights to be the written constitution of this land, there is the Scottish case from just last week where Lord Braid ruled that politicians cannot ban Christians from attending church during the pandemic, citing the fundamental right to thought, conscience, and religion found in Article 9 of that convention. For Johnson's paramilitaries, their sole guidance appears to be what they chillingly refer to as the regulations, the seemingly endless suite of ministerial decrees issued upon the very dubious authority of the 1984 Public Health Act. Even here, the police got it wrong, as in an act of remarkable disrespect, they breached the chancel or sanctuary of the church, blurting into a microphone that this gathering is unfortunately unlawful under the coronavirus regulations we have currently. You are not allowed to meet inside with this many people under law. And as the meme has it, oi, you got license for this religious service? Yes, and the police in Britain wonder why they are so disliked. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Dan, Picasso 88, Don from Beyond, Jokokin 666. Picasso 88 says, Ottawa's news anchors incredulous the Texans could enjoy a baseball game. They're not social distancing. Hello to Manfred von Thistlebaum. Fruity Doctor on CTV Ottawa. Don't people know how dangerous new variants are? It's magic. Hello to me too, an MF superstar. My trail of disgrace is one positive I see to all the sanitary hysteria is hospitals have returned to actually cleaning regularly, something that at least in Canadian hospitals seems to have not been done for 2 decades. Well, I'm certainly glad to see that, although I spend as little time in hospitals as I possibly can. Hospitals are where people die. Jesus on the cross wearing a mask, says Adam. Did you see that Joe and Dr. Jill Biden went on the White House balcony on Easter Sunday? They were both wearing masks, of course, and they had an enormous, grotesque Easter bunny who was wearing a mask as well. Yes, MF Superstar noted that. Hello to G's Stall. Adam says, zero integrity woke media hack Amy Goodman ends her show each day with, remember, wearing a mask is an act of love. Wearing 2 is even better. How about wearing 3? Or my suggestion, us having our lips sewn shut for the duration. Yeah, that would surely be efficacious. Would it not? A glib medley response to my trail of disgrace. Same for the New York subways. Never been cleaner. And, oh, yes. Let's torment children on airplanes. This is from Andy R. Whitberg, an American thinker. Yet another story about airlines behaving badly broke Monday. This time, a family of 4 got kicked off a flight because the 2-year-old toddler was eating. However, unlike all the other grotesque examples of panicked mask fascism, this story has a happy ending. The flight attendant who caused the ruckus was the one who ultimately got kicked off the plane, and the family was allowed back on. As a preliminary matter, the evidence is very strong that little children neither get nor give COVID from or to those around them. And as a factual matter, putting masks on a child who has just turned 2 is cruel. The family situation was also difficult. Not only did they have a baby who had just turned 2, but they also had a special needs child who has seizures, and the mother is 7 months pregnant. Also, it may matter that the family was obviously Jewish, for the father was wearing a yarmulke, a point I'll address a little later. In the case of this family, people surrounding the family objected to the flight attendant kicking the family off when the toddler wanted to eat something. Eventually, the flight attendants, for reasons that aren't clear, kicked everyone off the plane. The story has a happy ending. Everybody but the bullying flight attendant was allowed back on the plane. But back to the point about the family being Jewish, this is the 3rd time in 2 years that flight attendants have kicked Jewish families off planes for weird or inappropriate reasons. Just last month, Frontier Airlines kicked 22 Hasidic family members off a plane because of an alleged mask violation. Family members, as well as witnesses, said the unmasked member of the party was 15 months old, and the federal guidelines about masks do not apply to children under 2. Worse, according to witnesses, Frontier staffers cheered and high-fived each other while exclaiming, "We did it," after ordering all 22 Jewish passengers off the plane. The airline, however, insisted that several other family members were non-compliant. In 2019, American Airlines kicked a Jewish family off the plane, claiming they smelled bad. There's a definite theme here of obviously Jewish passengers running into trouble with airline attendants. There's one other twist to this story of the family kicked off the plane Monday. In the second video, the father notes explicitly that the push for them to leave came from a black woman. At the very least, this reflects ongoing tensions between blacks and Jews. I'm someone who believes that masks are pure theater. If we handled masks in a sterile fashion, putting on new N95 masks every time we are required to wear them, trashing the old ones, and instantly sterilizing our hands, I might believe in them. As it is, though, the masks themselves are ridiculous disease vectors being handled constantly and taken on and off repeatedly. Their only utility is to offer some protection from large loogies if people cough or sneeze, and even that is doubtful, given the way masks are mishandled. But there is good news. On Monday, the passengers fought back simply by being the opposite of Karens. They understood that it's insane to kick a family off a plane because a toddler is eating without a mask. Even the pilot and other crew members stood up against one flight attendant's madness, and Spirit Airline itself punished the attendant, not the family. We, the people, have the power to make this stop. When we sit silently, we are complicit. When we speak up, things get better. Oh, yes. This is a somewhat unrelated story, but it's from Breitbart by Dr. Susan Berry. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson vetoes bill banning transgender drugs surgeries for minors. Hutchinson said in a press conference that the Arkansas Save Adolescents from Experimentation, or SAFE Act, the first of its kind in the nation, was well intended but off course. The governor fully explained, if House Bill 1570 becomes law, then we're creating new standards of legislative interference with physicians and parents as they deal with some of the most complex and sensitive matters involving young people. Yes, like turning women into men and vice versa. It is undisputed that the population of minors who struggle with gender incongruity or gender dysphoria is an extreme minority. But while they are a minority, they deserve the guiding hand of their parents and of the healthcare professionals that the family has chosen. House Bill 1570 would put the state as the definitive oracle of medical care, overriding parents, patients, and healthcare experts. While in some instances the state must ask to protect life, the state should not presume to jump into the middle of every medical, human, and ethical issue. Ho, ho, very satirical. This would be and is a vast government overreach. And there's a picture at the top of this story from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette of Governor Asa Hutchinson, and he is adjusting a mask on his face which says, "I wear this for you," with a big heart next to it. Just the unmitigated gall of this fellow talking about government interference after a year in which the government has said, no, you can't leave your house. No, you can't go to work. No, you can't go into this store because it's inessential. No, you can't go into a park, etc., etc., etc. They have no idea of how ridiculous they have become. I wear this for you because I love you. Here's a story from Jordan Schachtel at Substack, and just let me make it a little bigger here. Liberty advocates rejoice. The idiocracy is going to save us from another form of COVID tyranny, thanks to a combination of bungling authoritarians and decaying legacy corporations. These entities are simply too incompetent to pull off a functioning vaccine passport program. New York's rollout of its vaccine passport already has the makings of a 5-alarm dumpster fire. The New York State Excelsior vaccine passport system, which was created by IBM, has so many issues that I wouldn't be surprised if the program was scrapped altogether before the end of the calendar year. It has massive security flaws, a shrinking customer base by design. It remains incredibly impractical, and it's incredibly easy to manipulate. Excelsior Pass sucks thanks to the idiocracy that was responsible for its design and implementation. Say you want to attend a Knicks game this evening at Madison Square Garden, a partner to the Excelsior Pass program. It's 9 a.m. and your event is at 7:30 p.m. If you don't have the vaccine yet, that means you will need to obtain a negative COVID-19 test to receive your pass. Want to take that test this morning? Not so fast. The antigen test needs to have been administered within the last 6 hours, so you better plan your entire day around navigating that short window between your COVID test and the event this evening. Just received your second dose and you're ready to hit the town? Not so fast. You must wait at least 2 weeks before your green check mark appears on your vaccine passport. Has it been more than 90 days since your last dose? Rejected. You only have a 76-day window, more than 14 days, under 70 days, to acquire a Vax Pass, which has to be renewed every 30 days. Received a vaccine or COVID test from out of state? Took a private at-home test kit or a test from a provider that is not registered in the New York State Central Database? Looks like you're out of luck. You will not be able to receive your prized Excelsior Pass because your information never made it into the system. Are you an out-of-state resident looking to attend an event or enter an Excelsior Pass participating store? You're out of luck. The New York system does not communicate with other databases and other plans, states' plans on rewarding vaccine passport contracts to other companies. In order to download the Excelsior Pass on your phone, you need the latest version of Android or iOS. For users of phones that are more than 4 to 5 years old, that means you will not be able to access the application. If you have an iPhone 6 or earlier, you cannot download Excelsior because it runs only on the latest operating system, which doesn't work on these older phones. Users of the app are absolutely hammering it for its dysfunction. Of the 240 reviews for the application on iOS, over 100 reviews received 1 star out of 5. Here are some of the ratings. Don't display DOB, password protect, integrate Apple Wallet support. I'm a resident of New York State, but was able to get my vaccine in Florida while out for the winter. I will never be in any New York State stats or database. We need a national approach to this issue. We need to stop having each state do their own thing. downloaded it and filled in the required information about my vaccination. I was within the time requirements, and yet it said I wasn't eligible for a certificate. And there's a final, continuously giving error messages. I recently got vaccinated and PCR tested, but for some reason I can't get neither pass. It's frustrating, and I'm sure people that already don't want to be vaccinated or tested won't put up with these annoyances. And finally, I am not eligible for a vaccine pass because the app says it's been more than 100 days since my last shot. First, it has not been 180 days. Second, I was under the impression the app provides proof of vaccination. Why would eligibility for that proof expire after 180 days? Chautel continues, New York's Excelsior Pass was constructed on IBM's Digital Health Pass platform. IBM claims that it keeps your data secure on its blockchain technology platform, which is a corporate buzzword excuse for a total lack of transparency about it hosts your sensitive health records. In fact, a devastating February report on IBM's blockchain program showed it failed to produce anything meaningful, and the company has cut its staff by a reported 90%. Overpromising and underdelivering is nothing new for IBM. Before the blockchain hype, IBM promised it would help treat and cure cancer through its Watson artificial intelligence platform. Watson AI has been marketed for a decade, and it's produced almost nothing of substance. Both IBM Blockchain and IBM's Watson AI have been catered specifically to healthcare applications, and neither has developed any substantial real-world uses. Don't be surprised if IBM's vaccine passport program, which is part of its IBM Blockchain skeleton crew, meets the same fate. IBM, New York State seriously went to IBM. That company has had just a horrific reputation for many, many years now, largely because they decided to save money by getting people in India to do work that used to be done by Americans. The IBM New York vaccine passport has incredibly lax security protocols, making it easy for a random individual to steal your identity and obtain Governor Cuomo's vaunted Excelsior Pass. In order to see if someone is eligible for a pass and acquire their COVID-19 health records, all you need is a first and last name, a date of birth, and a zip code. Yes, not even their address, just their zip code. If you're eligible for the pass, you then get taken to a second screen where you have to enter more relatively easily obtained information to verify your identity. Even if you get some questions wrong, it appears you can go back and answer an unlimited amount of times until you get the right information. He concludes, vaccine passports are inhumane, discriminatory, and will lead to America on a direct path to a China-like social credit score system that restricts our unalienable rights. The good news for you New Yorkers is that the Cuomo administration and IBM are the dream team of incompetence. Excelsior Pass will almost certainly fail because a legacy governor and a legacy tech outfit are not sophisticated enough to produce a working totalitarian project for their COVID safety regime. Yes, their failure is our success. Let's go to lockdown. Skeptics, child jabs halted in trial as adult clot-linked probe. That's, of course, a reference to concerns over the link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and rare cases of blood clots. Secondary school pupils must continue to wear face masks in lessons after Easter. John Tanney, a vice president of Freedom's Works, editor of Real Clear Markets, and the editor of the newly released book, When Politicians Panicked, The New Coronavirus, Expert Opinion, and a Tragic Lapse of Reason, has written a new piece. Here's a quote. Oxford professor Sunitra Gupta, one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, has long argued that globalization's genius has been understated. It's not just that the division of labor has enabled relentless specialization among the world's workers. It's not just that people bumping into each other have spread ideas and processes that have driven even greater economic achievement that has easily been the greatest foe of disease and death. Globalization has also fostered a great deal of physical in-person interaction among productive, specialized people increasingly processing the means to see the globe. As a consequence, they haven't just seen the world in a health sense, they've spread viruses around the world. With more and more of the world's inhabitants moving around the globe, so have viruses. The spreading hasn't weakened the global population, rather it's strengthened it. Immunity is most notably achieved naturally, and it's achieved much more quickly when people are constantly interacting with other people. I read an interesting story about the film director James Cameron, which may or may not be true. It seems that he has decamped to New Zealand, the home of zero COVID, or soi-disant zero COVID, and that James Cameron believes that the world is quite possibly coming to an end by the end of this decade because of, wait for it, viruses. And then he intends to ride out the storm in New Zealand, and if necessary, live on the ocean on one of his many stupendous yachts. South Dakota may have taken the least restrictive approach to COVID-19 of anywhere in the Western world. Its governor, Kristi Noem, has been a stalwart opponent of lockdowns. When the state's epidemic burgeoned at the end of August, there were practically no restrictions in place. Despite this, case numbers fell rapidly after reaching a peak in mid-November, and by late February, they were in the low triple digits. And deaths have continued to fall. The last 7 days saw an average of just 1 death per day. Although South Dakota has the eighth highest death rate among U.S. states, its epidemic retreated without any government intervention, and no new restrictions were introduced in March or the first week of April. What's more, South Dakota has done better economically than most other states and Western countries. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, its GDP fell only 1.7% in 2020, the seventh lowest among U.S. states. To give a different example, Britain's GDP plunged nearly 10% last year, and I believe New Zealand's GDP fell something like 12, 13%. South Dakota currently has the lowest unemployment rate out of all 50 states at just 2.9%. One might say you can't equate GDP and unemployment with human life, but that is simply not true. The money to pay for medical care in Britain and programs like Medicare and Medicaid in the US comes from taxing economic activity. The less economic activity, the less money there is available. And that's before you even factor in the social costs of unemployment and bankruptcy. One should be cautious about extrapolating from South Dakota to countries like Britain, given the state's low population density. However, the trajectory of the epidemic casts serious doubt on the models that led us into lockdown. And let's go back to the chat. MS Superstar. Commercials, all intelligence assaulting, zany, madcap, eye-rolling situations, all gag until last second when they say State Farm, Aflac, Geico, whatever. I'm afraid I have the Liberty Mutual jingle in my mind. I can't get it out of my head. Liberty, liberty, liberty. They run that commercial so often. It's a zany emu who gets into difficulties and is always attacking things that thinks are emus. What that has to do with insurance is an interesting question. I suppose there is a risk in some places of being attacked by emus. I understand that they're rather ferocious animals. Is Welbeck, that would be Michel Welbeck, the French novelist, writing a pandemic novel? I wonder, says Adam. I don't know. Maybe he'll try something a little different. I'm going to be talking on Friday about P.D. James's novel, The Children of Men, which is about the death of humanity. Because it turns out that people can no longer procreate. We're a long way from there, I suppose. Although I've heard that the Zoroastrians in India, the Parsis, if current trends continue, will be extinct within 2 or 3 generations, completely extinct. But no, birth rates are falling and falling and falling and keep falling. It would appear that the way we live now leads to a situation where people believe that they cannot afford children, or it's not worth having children. et cetera, et cetera. Now, a country that gives up on any society that gives up on the future, as we seem to have, that's a pretty dire situation. Mr. Chuck the Buck Norris says, I see grown, healthy men wearing masks outside here in Ottawa, as I do here in Victoria, where I will note, once again, this is a very windy city. And I just imagine that the coronavirus is huddled, at a street corner, maybe a electrical pole or whatever. They're just huddling there in the air. And then they see someone walking down the street a quarter of a block away without wearing a mask. And they say, get them, boys. You go for the eyes. I'll go for the nose. I'll go for the mouth. Is that what they think that happens when you're outdoors? Chogokin666 makes a comment about a mask and what it smells like, which I won't repeat. MF Superstar says sperm counts plummeting. They say, MF Superstar sperm might be extinct by 2060. Again, from Chogokin666, saw a guy in the bus, really disgusting, fat-bearded specimen with the most absolutely filthy mask. It was revolting. Okay. Don Willis says blacks make up 14% of the U.S. population. 13, I believe. Yet on Madison Avenue, they would have us believe 75%. As noted previously, this is even more pronounced in Canadian advertisements than in American advertisements, because I have the opportunity to see both. Jeffrey Pye says, have you heard about our toxic mask issues we've been having here amongst school kids in PQ? Would that be the province of Quebec? One model was recalled, and we are told they are testing the others, which the kids must still wear. No, as that fellow writing a conservative, what the American Thinker pointed out, there is a proper mask protocol, which is not being followed. They have to closely fit. No beards, people. You don't touch them. You're sterilized. Then when they're done, you throw them away and move on to another mask. But we haven't been doing that. And I find in my own case, when I'm forced to wear a mask, suddenly on the inside, it gets itchy and I have to, scratch it, which is, you're not supposed to do. But apparently we wear masks because we wavu. Okay. Any commercial in the banner with a strange device? Excelsior. Yes, I was hoping that someone would mention Longfellow. I'll take a vaccine against the Knicks, says Jay Miller. Yo, mama, it's my birthday and I'll cry if I want to. Well, happy birthday. Poor Gonzaga. Did they lose? How did a little school in Eastern Washington get to be such a basketball power? Curious. Okay. MF Superstar says, re-idiocracy, the commercials for the NCAA final games were sheer unmitigated idiocracy. Not to mention women named Karen who now cringe when they introduce themselves, says MF Superstar. The term Karen is insidious, a linguistic kill shot. Manfred von Thistlebaum says intercontinental travel should be permitted only by inner tube. Glib Medley says, I remember some Hasids getting kicked off the bus for eating pickled herring. I support that. Well, for the longest time, one wasn't able to eat or drink anything on the bus, but now it seems that, half the people on it have their meals. It's supposed to be some sort of coffee, but it's really a meal. I used to watch the Democracy Now! Daily broadcast thinking it was news, says Me Too. Zero Integrity woke me. Oh, yes, we talked about that already. Okay, my trail of disgrace says my mask cause a tickle in my throat and need to cough. Don't get that without a mask. Feel horrible when having to wear it for more than half hour. I don't know. I'm sure other people, this happens to other people, that when I move from a place that is warm to cold or vice versa, my nose runs. And if I'm wearing a mask, it's just, yeah, I suppose my mask should be sterilized on a daily basis, but it is not. Hello to Professor Pohl. Hot bug soy latte shakes on the bus. It's not necessary. You know, if you're taking a bus in town, why is it necessary to eat or drink anything? Are there people suffering from dehydration on the bus? Imminent starvation? And of course, if we're, really worried about cleanliness, then of course, that's another reason for banning it. And finally, on this dread topic, we'll check in with Alex Berenson. When Jen Psaki is, begging Americans, to stop living normal lives, I get the impression that she realizes that we're almost at the end of this. Alex Berenson tweets, bulletin from Dr. Anthony Fauci. Why would you ask me about Texas? Of course I'm confused about it. It's a super confusing place. Is it even part of America? It shouldn't be. Bulletin from Dr. Anthony Fauci. From a physician, he is right. The appendix shows 39 COVID deaths in the 60,000 unvaccinated, 20 in the 600,000 vaccinated. More importantly, no disclosure of all-cause mortality in either group. None of the real-world studies have ever revealed that figure. Gee, I wonder why. The Republican Party suddenly has an opportunity to stand for freedom and individual choice and distinguish itself from El Hombre Naranja in a meaningful way. Which governors have come out against vaccine passports, Berenson asks. Ron DeSantis, Kemp of Georgia, and Abbott of Texas. That's 3 of the largest 8 states, 60 million plus Americans. Interesting constitutional questions on the horizon. Indeed, I think this may get quite interesting, and soon. The COVID vaccine's totally 100% effective in stopping deaths from COVID, and by 100%, we mean maybe 75% once they become effective. We're still working on it. This was a comment on a news story, it looks like from the New York Post. 246 fully vaccinated Michigan residents get COVID-19. 3 die. Oh, and Berenson responds to the earlier tweet from Tom Elliott that I had mentioned. And he responds, 1, follow the science. 2, wait 2 weeks. 3, nod wisely. 4, in case of emergency, mentioned variants. Yeah. Ooh, variants. Yes, as if viruses have never done this before. COVID-19 is a unique event in the history of humanity, it would seem. Donald Trump lost the presidential election in November, and of course he hasn't been president since January. But the never-Trumpers appear to have been permanently traumatized by him. The poor dears. This is from the New Republic, an epic debate on Trump and true evangelicalism, in which journalist Matt Labash, a never-Trumper, and radio host Eric Metaxas, a Trump supporter, agree to disagree. I used to read Matt Labash, I believe in the American Spectator, years ago. I thought that he was funny. I no longer think so. Apparently, it would seem that the biggest problem that American evangelicalism has now is not the fact that it's largely devolved into a health and happiness cult, or that it is just, crawling scam artists and grifters. No, it's that too many evangelicals support Donald Trump. Labash begins, many years ago, I profiled a Christian professional wrestler named George South. He fought as a heel or a bad guy, but not wishing to do his Christian testimony any harm, he would sport John 3:16 on the seat of his banana hammock. the very same britches that he might fish a pair of brass knuckles out of to cold cock a referee when he wasn't looking. I asked George how he accounted for the mixed messaging. He essentially said that sometimes you have to climb into the squared circle, face the darkness, and hit someone over the head with a chair for Jesus. I suppose that's an interesting story. I don't know what it has to do with Donald Trump. Labash continues, on the surface, you and I have much in common. You've written biographies of Martin Luther and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I went to a Lutheran elementary school, and like Bonhoeffer, am no fan of Hitler's. Yes. I'm glad that you clarified that point, Matt Labash, because, you're an evangelical, so, I just made the Hitler connection. What's wrong with you? We have both spent much of our lives in evangelical circles. We both, without apology, pledge allegiance to our Lord and Savior, J.H. Christ. No, don't use that phrase. Not in a serious article. That said, even though you are a Christian brother and co-equal partner in the search for truth, part of me wants to go George South on you and hit you in the head with a chair for Jesus, figuratively. Of course, you're supposed to say Minecraft, actually. Why? I'll tell you why. Donald J. Trump. Yes, I understand he's not president anymore, even if he seems to be having trouble grasping that fact. But for all the disk space he takes up in the consciousness of Republicans and evangelicals, the intersection of which is around 82%, he might as well be. While Trump had the lowest approval rating of any president since Gallup kept keeping track in the 1930s, we all know that polling with regard to Donald Trump is extraordinarily accurate, as it was in 2016 and in 2020. Let's see. Trump scored 97% approval with the adoring crowd at the Conservative Political Action Committee. This after 2 impeachments and him headlining an insurrection. No, Labash, you moron. It was not an insurrection. That alone is hardly surprising. When you run a cult, the cultists tend to see things your way. But it's broader than that. Comb through recent survey results and a disturbing picture emerges. A Suffolk University USA Today poll in February after Trump's coup attempt, there was no coup attempt, the only coup attempts were against Trump, had Republicans stating by a double-digit margin, 46% to 27%, that they would abandon the GOP and join the Trump party if he created one. After months of Trump stoking conspiracy theories and all manner of delusional fever. Oh, you mean like the one about Putin stealing the 2016 election? Oh, and the Ukrainian plot? I mean, I could go on. Lifeway research poll found that 49% of U.S. Protestant pastors claiming that they frequently hear their congregation members parroting current event conspiracy theories. A January AEI poll reported 29% of Republicans and 27% of white evangelicals believing QAnon conspiracy theories. Renowned pastor and COVID truther John MacArthur has said that any real true believer has to vote for Trump. Franklin Graham, the moral runt of Billy's litter, that doesn't sound very Christian, compared the 10 lonely House Republicans who voted for Trump's impeachment to Judas Iscariot, taking 30 pieces of silver in exchange for their immortal souls. And while I generally consider it bad manners to lunge for the jugular of a dinner guest before the saddle plates have even been cleared, I have to say you've been no slouch in the shamelessly shilling for Trump department, Eric. Like Trump, you spent months peddling his massive election fraud fantasy. You wrote children's books with titles like Donald Drains the Swamp. Never mind his 5 or so cabinet secretaries who resigned under ethical clouds, or his personal lawyer and campaign manager, both of whom went to prison, or the other former campaign manager who was merely indicted before collecting his presidential pardon. I'm well aware of St. Paul's admonition that God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. If that's the case here, God would have really scored, because it's hard to pick a bigger fool than Donald J. Trump. Yes, that's the thing that stands out about Donald J. Trump, isn't it? That he's a fool. Is he? That he had never had any success in life, not in business, not in politics. Just a reminder that when Donald Trump announced his presidential bid, all the experts like Matt Labash assured us that this was preposterous, that it was not even serious, that he was just looking to burnish his brand, and that if he ever won the nomination, well, he wouldn't run. Let's see, though I don't have my doctorate of divinity or anything, I have read the Bible a couple thousand times, even Trump's favorite parts like 2 Corinthians. And nowhere do the scriptures tell us, blessed are the mean tweeters, the sociopathic narcissists, the conspiracy mongers and seditionists, for they shall inherit the earth. It's not in any translation I've picked up. I don't get it. It's dispiriting. I always thought we worshipped our triune God, but somewhere along the way, say around 2015, it seems like the Holy Trinity became a quaternity, with Trump batting cleanup for the Holy Ghost. One gets the feeling these days if the Son of Man went walking on water across Florida's intercoastal waterway instead of the Sea of Galilee, he might be plowed under by a Trump boat parade and possibly impaled on Franklin Graham's water ski. I'm not sure anyone would mourn. They'd be too busy anticipating the resurrection of their new and improved orange Jesus. Oh, Trump supporters like boats. That's not good. They like boat parades, and everyone knows that boat parades are evil. Yes, they still can't get over Donald Trump, and the reason for it is that he wasn't supposed to happen. The Republican Party was supposed to continue to nominate non-entities, or, even better, people who were determined to declare war on the entire world forever. And Trump wasn't interested in doing that. Last year, Joe Biden announced that he intended to make some changes in the law, specifically that when victims of sexual assault went to the police, they would be believed. That's simple. The presumption of innocence for those accused of sexual assault would be eliminated. Now, in a country with a serious media or an elite, that pretty much would have finished him off. People would have howled in terror. Now, yes, victims. Well, how do we know that these people are victims? I suppose if it were caught on video, that might help. But in most cases, none of these events are caught on video. Almost all of these events are he said, she said. And so obviously, there needs to be a great deal of proof for people to be convicted and sent to prison. Victims are not victims. They may be in the eyes of God, who sees everything, but the rest of us rely on courts. I suppose it would be difficult for Biden to interfere in the criminal justice system of all 50 states, although I suspect his Department of Justice is working on that right now. I guess the universities have been nationalized. The Education Department on Tuesday, this is from ABC News, moved forward with plans to revise federal rules around campus sexual assault, paving the way for an overhaul of a polarizing Trump-era policy that President Joe Biden has vowed to reverse. In a letter to the nation's colleges and schools, the department said it will formally begin the process to amend federal rules around Title IX, the federal law that forbids sexual discrimination in education. Oh, so stripping due process from men accused of sexual assault is not sexual discrimination in education? The department is planning a public hearing on the issue and afterward will issue official notice that the rules are under review. Biden called for a broad review of sexual discrimination policies in March, and his executive order specifically requested scrutiny of rules finalized last year by then Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. Biden and other critics have said the rules fail to protect survivors of sexual assault and go too far in protecting the accused. Again, we don't know that these people are survivors of sexual assault. People make all sorts of claims. Typically, rational people do not believe in claims until they have been proven. To do so brings this into the realm of religion and not law. As a presidential candidate in May 2020, Biden vowed a quick end to the rules, saying they guarantee that college campuses will be less safe for our nation's young people. DeVos saw the rules as one of her most significant achievements. She said they balanced the scales in college discipline systems that had become stacked against the accused. Her rules gave accused students the right to cross-examine their accusers through representatives at live hearings, among other protections for the accused. Her rules also narrowed the definition of sexual harassment, limited colleges' authority to investigate claims arising beyond campus, and reduced schools' legal liability as they address claims of misconduct. Advocates for the accused applauded the policy, while critics said it would deter victims from reporting misconduct. College leaders complained the rules were overly complex and burdensome. Of course, an obvious question is, what business is this of the federal government? Well, I suppose it's a question of money. You will do as we say, or we will cut off the money supply. Some good news about boycotts. This is from Conservative Treehouse. Last week, President Donald Trump asked for a full and unrelenting boycott of several corporations who are operating as political activists to advance an agenda on behalf of the far left. The corporations spoke against election integrity and are opposed to secure election reforms. Among those corporations cited for immediate boycott was Delta Airlines. On Sunday, Delta canceled over 100 flights. Delta is claiming staff shortages suddenly appeared in multiple states simultaneously. That had never happened before, immediately after the boycott began. This story reeks of Delta canceling the flights because of the boycott, but they don't want to admit the reason for the cancellation, so they make up an artificial justification. You decide what is likely. A coincidental cancellation across multiple states, affecting multiple flights at multiple locations, or the boycott is working. Regardless, keep up the pressure. This can work if the American people commit to the boycott. Major League Baseball, Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, JP Morgan Chase, Viacom CBS, Citigroup, Cisco, UPS, and Merck. Yes, and just an update on my own boycott of Major League Baseball. I'm still holding firm. I haven't even checked the standings. And so what do they say? The first week is the hardest. And so I guess I saw the opening game on Thursday. So it's been, 5 days since I've seen a game or paid any attention to the Blue Jays or any other team. So looks like I'm going to make it. And there has been some pushback against Biden declaring war on the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia. This is from Josh Feldman at Mediaite. The panel on ABC's This Week got particularly heated over the new Georgia election law, with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie going off on President Joe Biden in particular. Christie told George Stephanopoulos that Biden's broken his own rule about stating the truth, saying the president is lying to the American people about what the law says. He's lying about this bill. He's lying to the American people about it to cause the raging fire he said he was going to put out. I'm very disappointed. Christie even accused Biden of doing exactly what he sat around in the campaign and the transition and accused Donald Trump of doing. He is lying to cause racial divisions in this country. That's what he accused Donald Trump of doing, and he's a liar and a hypocrite. Democracy for America CEO Yvette Simpson said in response to Christie, "You should ask the people who know. I've been doing voter protection for 10 years. Just the idea that you can't get people water in line. That's not true," Christie said. And again, are we supposed to believe that people waiting to vote in Georgia, like say in November, are all going to be dying of thirst? Of course, they can always bring liquid with them, as so many Americans do when they leave their houses. The panel clashed over that section of the law, but Rahm Emanuel made a point of going back to Christie's comments to defend the president. Well, you've got Stephanopoulos and Rahm Emanuel on this panel. Joe Biden's not a liar, Emanuel said. Yes, he is, Christie responded. We just spent 4 years with a person who literally couldn't find the truth if it said choo-choo in front of him in the morning, Emanuel shot back. Christie responded, he lied, Rahm, and he's going to have to live with it. The Major League Baseball's All-Star Game has been switched to Denver, which, guess what, requires photo ID for voting. Amusing, no? This is from John Nolte at Breitbart. His fraudulency, Joe Biden barely walked away with Georgia's electoral votes in 2020. Stacey Abrams nearly won the state's 2018 gubernatorial race. Both would like to win Georgia in coming elections, and now both, due to their shameless and deliberate lies, have screwed Georgia and its citizens out of Major League Baseball's All-Star Game, which was set to generate at least $100 million. Yes, I've seen the figure $150 million. I don't believe any of these figures. People go to the game, okay. They buy merchandise, they buy food, they go to restaurants, near the stadium, they have parties. The All-Star Baseball Game is not really such a big deal anymore, not like it used to be. And are we supposed to believe, this is a common economic argument, that these people would not be spending money on other things if the All-Star Game didn't come to Atlanta, that they would perhaps burn this money if they didn't have an opportunity to spend it on the All-Star Game or things related? I don't believe any of it. In any event, people seem to believe these kinds of figures. Nolte continues, the irony, however, is that it's the Democrat-run city of Atlanta that is going to take the $100 million wipeout in the neck, that's going to lose all that money that could have done tremendous good in a city ravaged by the pandemic. Well, thanks to the Democrat voters of Atlanta, their own city has just been hit with a second pandemic, a pandemic of lies that wiped $100 million in revenue and spending right off the table, all those jobs, all those customers for struggling small businesses. Well, all I can say is LOL. Georgia passed a perfectly reasonable voter integrity bill that in many ways expanded the opportunity to vote. At the same time, it instituted vital safeguards such as voter ID, something popular with 70% of the American people, including Black Americans. But these two racial demagogues and serial liars lied and lied and lied about this bill. They claim it cut early voting hours. Lie. They claim water would not be given to people waiting in line for vote. Lie. They claim it restricted absentee voting. Lie. And now it's all backfired right in Democrat-run Atlanta's stupid face. The racial arsonists intimidated the panty waists and Nancy boys in corporate America. And then MLB picked up and moved its All-Star Game to Boulder, Colorado. Sorry, not Denver, Boulder. No. Okay. A state that requires voter ID, a state with fewer early voting days. Oh, and now that it's too late, Joe Biden, the racial demagogue who, just like Abrams, called Georgia's new law Jim Crow, even though Biden's home state of Delaware has even more restrictive voting laws, said he would back an all-star boycott, is blaming others for his wicked handiwork. He was not dictating for what Major League Baseball should do, dictating that they should move the All-Star Game. White House press secretary Lion Ginger said on Monday that was their decision. They made that decision. And as he stated earlier, he certainly supports that. Yes, the President of the United States says, I very much want Major League Baseball to do something. I don't know. There's an antitrust exemption there. I suppose, Biden got angry with Major League Baseball. He could move against that. Well, how about the Masters, which is coming up in its proper time of the year this year? Biden mum on Masters after calling for all-star boycott over Georgia voting law. This is from Aaron Fells at the New York Post. President Biden on Tuesday punted when asked if the Masters golf tournament should pull out of Georgia to protest the state's new voting law. Addressing the issue following his announcement of expanded COVID vaccine eligibility by April the 19th, Biden was more neutral about the golf tourney, which kicks off Thursday in Augusta, than he was about baseball's Midsummer Classic. I think that's up to the Masters, said Biden. However, Biden went on to praise large corporate entities for taking a political stand, even as he acknowledged that it's often everyday Americans who get hurt the most by such boycott decisions. It's reassuring Biden said, to see that for-profit operations and businesses are speaking up about how these new Jim Crow laws are just antithetical to who we are. I just love the people who say, this is not who we are. Well, I guess it is, because they're doing it. Look, the idea, what the Masters is going to withdraw the tournament from Georgia, that's not how it works. The Masters tournament is held at the Augusta National Golf Club in Augusta, Georgia. It is a private company, and it is not part of the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association. According to Wikipedia, it is a for-profit corporation that does not disclose its income, holdings, membership list, or ticket sales. The PGA, it's not, the Masters is not part of the PGA, although the results in the tournament are accepted as PGA results. The PGA is a registered charity. It is a nonprofit organization. And the PGA has attempted to bully the Augusta National Golf Club and say, you really shouldn't be making money. Spectator money, merchandise money, food money, TV money from this. And Augusta National told them to pound sand. I don't think people in the media seem to understand how the Masters works. Oh, so Augusta National is going to say, no, we're just sick to death, because of this new election integrity law. So we're going to send our tournament, the tournament which is held every year at our privately owned golf club. We'll let, someplace in South Carolina or whatever have it. That's obviously never on the cards. Now, the PGA could move against Augusta National. They could, decertify it. I don't think the PGA would want to move against what is the most beloved and popular golf tournament in America and possibly the world. So a non-starter, I would say. Let's go back to the chat. Okay. What an insufferable oaf. This pillock is definitions of why the GOP are perpetual losers. Trump didn't even run as a social conservative. Yes, I saw it noted that Joy Behar, or someone like that, Sonny Hostin, perhaps, was complaining that Trump had destroyed the Republicans as a family values party. Oh, you have this closeness to Republicans, do you? The warm, toasty feelings for the Republican Party? No, you don't. One of the problems with family values is that what constitutes family values? I mean, Pete Buttigieg is married to a man who took his surname, but isn't that family values? Isn't gay adoption family values? Isn't Andy Cohen and Anderson Cooper with their children, isn't that considered family values now? And in any event, so many prominent family values candidates have been, caught out having mistresses, having affairs, making advances on other men in public washrooms and the like. And as the chat pointed out, Trump did not run as a conservative, and he did not run as a family values candidate because he was smart enough to understand that these labels are worthless. Now, Dracula for the book club, says Hauper. Actually, I reviewed Bram Stoker's Dracula, a couple of years ago when the book club was on Luke Ford's show. Steve says, I'm boycotting so much that I'm dressed in rags with nothing but a My Pillow and cans of Goya beans. Oh, this is good from Halper. My pillows can be delicious when cooked the right way. Professor Paul says, give your money to me and I will do good things with it. I can establish a history department better than Harvard for $100,000 US. Best Poll says, how about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley for the book club? Well, I shall consider it. Tricky Who says, 99 Gonzaga team. When I still watch sports ball, I was still a child. Sports ball is great for children. Now we eat on the go whenever, wherever, says MF Superstar. Previous generations ate all 3 meals at table with family. Yes, it's hard to believe. A lot of school children ate lunch at school. A lot of them came home for lunch. But yes, that's just not, it's not acceptable anymore, particularly to force children, or I suppose adults, to eat at particular times and to have them sit close to one another, even before coronavirus, you know. My own experience, recall deciding that I wanted my family to sit around the dinner table, and I had a huge problem, which was I thought, I don't know, school's over at 3, 5 o'clock sounds about decent time for supper. And the kiddies would come home and they would pour themselves enormous bowls of breakfast cereal filled to the brim with milk. And then they didn't want to eat anything else for several hours afterwards. I don't know. There's a great many people now, perhaps a majority, who essentially never stop eating. MF Superstar says, when I drive, passengers not allowed food or drink. It's uncivilized. Popcasso 88 says, I hate it when people ate on the bus. Pre-COVID, a guy was eating a sub and half of it ended up on his shirt and the floor. Oscar Toe says, Mitch McConnell said Fauci was a great man or something recently. Great judge of character. Jay Miller agrees, no eating or drinking in my car. You know, even drinking from, say, like a can of Coke or a bottle of Coke, sometimes cars have to speed up and sometimes they have to slam on the brakes. A pretty good possibility of Coke ending up all over your shirt, all over your jacket, all over your pants, most embarrassingly, the crotch of your pants, or all over the, upholstery or accoutrements of whatever car that you're in. Okay. Despite Trump's personal weaknesses on matters of social conservatism, he appointed 3 strong pro-life Scottish judges, says Jim Smith. Brandon Smith makes a joke. Did you hear about the Catholic churches boycotting their altar boys? Okay. Let's have some crime stories. Here's anarcho-tyranny from Milwaukee. This is from Thomas Lifson at American Thinker. You do not disrespect Black women from our community. You do not disrespect Black Lives Matter. You ever disrespect a Black woman again, we're going to shut you down. With these, in other words, a group of 10 Milwaukee Black Panthers invaded an Asian-owned nail salon and threatened it. Later, they returned and police arrived. Instead of protecting the Asian owner, a female officer spoke cordially with the Panthers, addressing their leader as General, and left the store saying, all right, I'm sure that he got your message, sir. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming down. Thank you. All of this is on video recordings, boastfully posted to Facebook by the leader of the Panthers, who styles himself King Rick, and who refers to Black female customers as queens. We only know this because of someone from Wisconsin right now who notes that the leader of the group is Daryl King Rick Farmer II. Boy, that's almost at idiocracy. Whose Facebook page proclaims him as leader and Black general of the original Black Panthers nationwide and other countries. Following these confrontations, the nail salon has been shut down. Its retail space vacated, a business and jobs no longer in existence. Farmer took credit for the nail salon business closing down and expressed jubilation. The original Black Panthers and the biggest panther in the jungle, King Rick, we are proud to announce the permanent closing of Jade's Nails on Brady Street. Due to the efforts of the original Black Party and community, they no longer exist. They disrespected our queens and paid the ultimate price. Out of business. Black Panther once again in full effect. All the mainstream media bemoaning Asian hate have no interest at all. Yeah, it kind of sounds like there's something unlawful about this. Criminal harassment? You know, in the old days, American blacks used to get very exercised about Jews operating businesses in their neighborhoods. And by the 1970s or whatever, the Jews got out because they're not very pleasant neighborhoods. And then others moved in, mostly Asians. Is it really that difficult to run a nail salon? Why doesn't LeBron James or someone like that step up and fund the operation of some, dozens of black nail salons across the United States? Again, is it really that hard to run a nail salon? I mean, how much expertise are we dealing in here? This is from Newsweek by Alia Slisko. A group calling itself White Lives Matter has reportedly stolen a monument to Confederate President Jefferson Davis and is holding it hostage while threatening that it will be turned into a toilet if ransom demands are not met. The Jefferson Davis Memorial Chair, which is a chair carved out of stone, was stolen from Selma, Alabama's old live oak cemetery in March. White Lives Matter took responsibility for the theft in emails reportedly sent to multiple local media outlets. Is this not a crime, by the way? Theft? Desecration of a churchyard? I should think that it is. The ransom the group is demanding is for the group United Daughters of the Confederacy hangs a banner bearing a quote from Assata Shakur outside its headquarters in Richmond, Virginia. White Lives Matter is demanding that the banner be hung for 24 hours beginning on Friday, the anniversary of the Confederacy's Civil War surrender. Failure to do so will result in the monument, an ornate stone chair, immediately being turned into a toilet, the group's emails state. If they do display the banner, not only will we return the chair intact, but we will clean it to boot. We took their toy and we don't feel guilty about it, they continue. They never play with it anyway. They just want it there to remind us what they've done, what they're still willing to do. But the South won't rise again, not as the Confederacy, because that coalition left out a large portion of the population. All that's left of that nightmare is an obscenely heavy chair that's a throne for a ghost whose greatest accomplishment was treason. The chair, described as being about 3 feet tall and weighing several hundreds of pounds, is said to be valued at $500,000. It was one of several Confederate monuments in the old live oak cemetery. A bust of Confederate general and KKK leader Nathan Bedford Forrest was stolen from the cemetery in 2012. The Shakur quote that White Lives Matter is demanding be displayed in return for the monument reads, "The rulers of this country have always considered their property more important than our lives." Perhaps in the future, White Lives Matter will be demanding that all white people in America must have those words tattooed on their body. I would not be surprised. Or maybe they could make it part of the, the vaccine passport. I have been rather amused recently by Canada getting its comeuppance at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party, also the United States of America, for the reason that none of the geniuses that run my country or yours figured out that if you are going to denigrate your own country as a hotbed of racism, of white supremacy, of genocide even, then you're going to run into difficulties when you criticize other countries. Tristan Hopper writes in the National Post, there was a time when the official stance of the People's Republic of China towards Canada was an indifference spiced with the occasional Norman Bethune reference. Bethune was a Canadian communist doctor who I believe also caused trouble in Spain. And for some years, apparently the Chinese loved us because of Norman Bethune. Those days are now firmly over. I'm thinking about basketball over. Under the rule of Xi Jinping, China has adopted an openly aggressive stance towards the Maple Leaf, a position represented most notably by the imprisonment of Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor in apparent retaliation for Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Yeah. So, yes, the Chinese are accusing us of kidnapping, which led to their own kidnapping. This rising hostility has led to a notable tone shift in how the Chinese state media and Beijing's official spokespeople refer to Canada. A sampling is below. The PRC has lashed out harshly at anyone who has criticized ongoing human rights abuses in China's Xinjiang province, where Muslim Uyghurs are being sterilized and corralled into re-education camps under the guise of anti-terrorism. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has waffled on calling the actions genocide. On February 22nd, nearly all of the House of Commons, except for Trudeau and his cabinet, backed a non-binding resolution stating that a genocide is currently being carried out by the People's Republic of China against Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims. Numerous Chinese diplomatic responses listed Canadian treatment of Indigenous peoples as evidence of Ottawa's hypocrisy on the issue. The Canadian side should ask itself when it comes to committing genocide and reflect deeply on the miserable experience of its Indigenous people, read a lengthy statement from China's embassy in Canada. In a tweet by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying, Canada's system of Indigenous residential schools was listed alongside the Holocaust as reasons why Western countries have absolutely no right to criticize China. Hua also tweeted the claim that 1 in 3 children sent to Canadian residential schools were killed, a rate that would make them deadlier than most Soviet gulags. Hua Jinping tweeted, 1870s, the Canadian government set up residential schools to carry out cultural genocide policies. Over 150,000 Indigenous children were sent to such schools, of which more than 50,000 died of abuses. Well, we had this BINO in Canada called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and, it was rigged from the start. But according to this, 6,000 deaths of residential school students as a result of their school experience. So not 1 in 3. Oh, but Canada Truth and Reconciliation Commission Chair Justice Murray Sinclair told CBC News that the TRC has recorded over 6,000 deaths. Odds of dying for children in Indian residential schools, 1 in 25. Odds of dying for Canadians serving in World War II, 1 in 26. What these figures do not tell us, well, what was a typical death rate in Canada at that time? What was a typical death rate for children in Canada at that time? Keep in mind, we're going back to the 1870s here. What was the typical death rate for people living in communities long from towns of any size with decent medical facilities? No. We don't hear any of that, which is why these terms are useless, completely useless. But back to China. Amid the flood of official Chinese outrage at Canada's February 22nd resolution was also a dedicated editorial in Global Times, an English-language tabloid put out by People's Daily, the official newspaper of the Chinese Communist Party. In it, the Five Eyes, the intelligence sharing alliance of the US, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, are branded an axis of white supremacy beholden to neo-Nazi interests. They have formed a US-centered, racist, and mafia-styled community, willfully and arrogantly provoking China and trying to consolidate their hegemony, as all gangsters do. It wrote, taking particular issue with the resolution's call for Canada to boycott the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. In August, an editorial in China Daily also took up the theme of Canada as a bastion of anti-Asian racism. Chinese Canadians are still a disadvantaged minority group in Canada and face the risk of becoming scapegoats for Canada's domestic problems and victims of systemic racism. Let's see. Li Yang, head of China's consulate in Rio de Janeiro, referred to Justin Trudeau, whom Yang also brands as a spendthrift who turned Canada into a running dog of the U.S. In May, after a Brazilian lawmaker referred to COVID-19 as the China virus, Yang lambasted him in a lengthy editorial that declared, should any country insist on being China's enemy, we will be its most sophisticated enemy. Yeah, okay. You know, if we're really so upset in Canada about the two Canadians that were kidnapped and about what's happening with the Uyghurs, I suppose we could also be upset about the continued Chinese theft of our trademarks, technology, consistent efforts to infiltrate scientific institutions. I suppose we could take serious action. How about starting with trade sanctions? As I like to point out, there's plenty of countries in the world. Well, Vietnam is one that produce cheap tat. Why do we have to get our cheap tat from China? You know, I would just suggest that if Canada is not really willing to take action and it is prepared to suffer the humiliation of the language of Chinese diplomats and bureaucrats, it would probably be best for Canada to just shut the hell up. And again, if you are going to tell the entire world that your country is wicked and has been wicked from its inception, guess what? Other people are going to notice. So let's go back to James Burnham and his discussion about whether politics can be scientific in his book, The Machiavellians, Defenders of Liberty. Burnham writes, the Machiavellian analysis, confirmed and reconfirmed by the evidence of history, shows that the masses simply do not think scientifically about political and social aims, and that even if they did, the technical and administrative means for implementing their scientific thought would necessarily be lacking. Beliefs, ideals do sometimes influence the political actions of the masses. These are not, however, scientific beliefs and ideals, but myths or derivations. There is, moreover, no reason to expect a change in this respect in the foreseeable future. During the 19th century, it was thought by many that universal education would enable the masses to be scientific about politics and thereby reach a perfect democracy. This expectation has been proved unfounded. In most great nations, illiteracy has almost been done away with. Nevertheless, the masses act no more scientifically today than a century or a millennium ago. In political affairs, the scientific potentialities of wider literacy have been more than counterbalanced by the new opportunities which mass education gives to non-scientific propaganda. At the same time, the ever-increasing size and complexity of modern social structures raise constantly new technical obstacles to the direct application of scientific procedures by the masses to their own political problems. Many modern politicians habitually tell the people that their fate is in their own hands. They rule themselves. They make the final and fundamental decisions. They are the court of last appeal. Remarks of this kind are all derivations expressing some variant of the democratic formulas. Their real purpose is to enable the politicians, while ruling in their own interests, to protect their regime by the moral sanction of the myth of the popular will. An honest statement to the masses, which by the nature of the case of the politician cannot give you, would have to say you cannot rule yourselves, distrust all leaders, and above all those who tell you that they are merely expressing or representing your will. Erect and cherish every possible safeguard against the unchecked exercise of power. Even though such a statement is never made, there are many among the masses who understand its meaning without being told. The great anti-fascist novelist Ignazio Siloni writes, the Cafon, which may be approximately translated as small farmer or sharecropper, is by no means primitive. In one sense, he is over-civilized. The experience of generations makes him believe that the state is merely a better organized camorra or racket. Marx often speaks of the peasants as having torpid minds, but what did he know about them? I imagine that he watched them in the marketplace at Trier and observed that they were sullen and tongue-tied. He would not stop to think that they had assumed this role deliberately. An American Saloni might mention in the same connection groups of farmers or industrial workers who passively listen one day to patriotic rhetoric about equal sacrifice and the next demand higher wages or prices. It is by adopting attitudes of this kind that the masses come closest to being scientific about politics. It is ludicrous for the authors of books like this one, that is, serious books about society, to pretend to speak to the people. The great bulk of the people in this country neither buys nor reads any books at all, thereby avoiding a great quantity of nonsense. The potential audience for this sort of book is, as statistics show, limited to a comparatively small section of the elite. The absurdity does not at all prevent the authors from covering page after page with rhetorical advice to the masses about what they can and should do to run society for their own welfare and interest. The words of the politicians do, however, reach the masses, and when the politicians say these things, it is not absurd but ominous. When it is accepted that the rulers rule as the mere agents for the will of the masses, then their rule becomes irresponsible. The rulers are no longer personally accountable for their actions. They may go to war, persecute, steal, violate freedoms, fail to prepare for social or military crises, and yet never be brought to task for whatever crime or failure they have only, they say, carried out the people's will. If the masses are stupid or selfish or easygoing or short-sighted, who are their humble rulers to be blamed? Small wonder that rulers do not encourage the growth of a science of politics. There remains then the question whether some sections of the elite can act scientifically about political affairs. It is necessary to raise the question in this modified form rather than about elite as a whole, because the elite is not ordinarily a homogeneous group. There is little doubt that an individual can conduct his political affairs scientifically or logically. For example, an individual granted certain capacities and some luck can decide to rise in the social scale and can take appropriate steps that will have a fair chance of achieving that aim. In some cases, individuals can, by deliberate scientific means, rise into the very top rank of social and political power. It is to be observed in these latter cases that ordinarily the single individual is not operating as an isolated unit. There are associated with him various other individuals, together forming a group more or less large. The most conspicuous individual may become premier or king or dictator, but power is really acquired by the group, not by any single individual. Nowadays, these groups will include, as a rule, certain experts in propaganda, public relations, and organizational skills, as well as one or more theoreticians. This sort of group constitutes a section of the elite, and there seems to be in general to be no reason why sections of the elite cannot function scientifically, at least within limits. The inability of the masses to function specifically in politics rests primarily on the following factors: the huge size of the mass group, which makes it too unwieldy for the use of scientific techniques; the ignorance on the part of the masses of the methods of administration and rule; the necessity for the masses of spending most of their energies on the bare making of a living, which leaves little energy or time for gaining more knowledge about politics or carrying out practical political tasks; the lack in most people of a sufficient degree of those psychological qualities, ambition, ruthlessness, and so on, that are prerequisites for active political life. The deficiencies can all be overcome in this case of sections of the elite. These are comparatively small in size. Their members can and do acquire a good deal of knowledge about administration and rule. Since their members either inherit or discover a way of extracting a living from others without too much effort on their own part, they have available time and energy in which to cultivate political skills. They are careful not to overburden their ranks with squeamish idealists. There would thus seem to be no theoretic reason why sections of the elite should not be scientific about political affairs. If our reference is to the governing elite, we are asking whether rulers can rule scientifically, and the answer would seem to be that, up to a certain point, they can. We may add that at certain periods in certain societies they have done so or come close to it. And I will have more on Burnham and democracy tomorrow. And it's a mysterious story, very mysterious story from Washington, D.C., which should be a much more important story than it is. Why isn't it? Well, as they say, to ask the question is to answer it. Julie Kelly writes in American Greatness, 3 months ago this week, Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, 42, died. The 12-year veteran of the force passed away the day after hundreds of Trump supporters mobbed the Capitol to protest Congress's certification of the 2020 Electoral College. The U.S. Capitol Police Department issued a statement January the 7th, just hours after he died. Quote, Officer Brian D. Sicknick passed away due to injuries sustained while on duty. Officer Sicknick was responding to the riots on Wednesday, January 6, 2021 at the U.S. Capitol and was injured while physically engaging with protesters. He returned to his division office and collapsed. He was taken to a local hospital where he succumbed to his injuries, unquote. Davis comments, Sicknick's death is a central rallying cry to bolster the narrative that the events of January 6 amounted to a deadly insurrection and the perpetrators must be punished accordingly. To produce compelling optics, Sicknick's remains lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda, a somber memorial attended by Joe Biden and his wife, as well as lawmakers from both political parties, the week before House Democrats launched their second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. In fact, the allegation Trump allies murdered Sicknick with a fire extinguisher is still included in the bill of particulars against the president. The insurrectionists killed a Capitol police officer by striking him in the head with a fire extinguisher, the trial memorandum claimed, without evidence, citing only a January 8th New York Times article as proof. Sicknick's remains were transported to Arlington National Cemetery February 3rd in another public ceremony attended by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Republican congressional leadership. 2 men were charged last month with using bear spray against Officer Sicknick. The U.S. attorney who headed the first several weeks of the Justice Department's Capitol breach manhunt said law enforcement is investigating whether the irritant played a role in Sicknick's death. But the D.C. Medical Examiner's Office, 3 months later, still cannot disclose exactly what happened to Brian Sicknick. The medical examiners comply with the National Association of Medical Examiners standard to determine the cause and manner of death within 90 days. However, for causes that are more complex, it could be longer, a spokeswoman told American Greatness. It's unlikely the case is complex, but instead exculpatory for January 6 protesters. So to summarize, there is no proof Officer Sicknick died of any cause, including a reaction to bear spray, related to his work on January 6th. Further, Sicknick's family members said they spoke with him the night of January 6th, and the officer said he was fine. His mother still doesn't know how he died, but suspects he suffered a stroke. The facts, of course, don't matter to the national news media, nor do they actually care about Brian Sicknick, apart from how they can exploit his death to fortify the collapsing storyline of January 6th, a date some compare to 9/11. Major news organizations continue to propagate this brazen lie about the circumstances surrounding Sicknick's death. At first, the public was told he was bludgeoned to death by Trump fanatics wielding a fire extinguisher. The New York Times, the source of the initial article, was forced to retract its story in February amid pressure from a handful of reporters. But the unproven version of Brian Sicknick's death is again making the rounds following the murder of Capitol Police Officer William Evans, who was killed by a Nation of Islam loyalist on Good Friday. National Public Radio repeated the line that Evans was the second to die in the line of duty after Sicknick. Nearly every major news organization in its coverage of officers' killings repeated the same claims about Sicknick. And it isn't just members of the media promoting the big lie. Joe Biden mourned the loss of yet another courageous Capitol Police officer, and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan tweeted his state was horrified by the death of another U.S. Capitol Police officer in the line of duty. Unlike the outlandish comparisons between January 6 protesters and al-Qaeda terrorists, the media, law enforcement officials, and politicians have been quick to downplay the killer's motives. Representative Tim Ryan, Democrat of Ohio, told a Cleveland television station that we don't know who this person was. We don't know what his mentality was, so we just got to figure this out. The Times also ran defense for the killer, a black man, immediately concluding no clear motive could be identified, while also disclosing how he struggled mentally before the attack. Evans' killing has already disappeared from the headlines. It's unclear whether his family, he is the father of two, will be invited to participate in a rare Capitol remembrance attended by the most powerful political leaders in the country, or whether he will be ceremoniously buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Unfortunately, Evans's death doesn't conform to the reigning groupthink that Trump-supporting domestic violent extremists pose the greatest threat to national security. To the contrary, the event that resulted in Evans's death was the second deadly ambush by an Islamic sympathizer in less than 2 weeks, which is why the media has lost interest in the April 2nd Capitol attack and the mass murder at a Boulder supermarket. The media is far too busy using Evans' death as an excuse to promote a known lie about January 6th. Democratic leaders in the American news media aren't just dishonest and shameless. They are fully depraved. Let's have a look at the chat. Glib Melly says, Bob Grant, he was a well-known New York City talk show host, was he not? Used gave on as a slur for his callers. That's where I first heard it. Enron asks, how many right-wingers were communists first? Well, I suppose back in the day, if you want to go well back, the neocons effectively came about from Trotskyite movement. Trotskyites broke with Stalin, or more to the point, Stalin broke with them, and they were still communists, but anti-Stalinist communists. Interestingly, one of the major reasons for the break was that Stalin believed in socialism in one country and Trotsky believed in worldwide revolution, just as the neocons do. In the 1970s, the neocons, they started becoming prominent, and it's mysterious why they became prominent, because they have never had a political base. Never. Not in 50 years. They're a handful, a few hundred people who work in think tanks, who have columns, and the like, appear on television. No political base. But we started hearing them with regard to Russia, about the right of Jews to leave the Soviet Union for Israel. Why these people were any special than any others who objected to the Soviet regime is a question that's never been answered, well, not to my satisfaction. And neocon thinking had become powerful by the end of the 1970s, particularly the belief that the Soviet Union was looking to acquire a first strike capability against the United States. And Richard Pipes was given carte blanche by the Reagan administration to investigate this. Here's the conclusion that he and his team came to. There is no evidence that the Soviet Union is seeking a first strike capability, which means that it's true. Yes, that's the conclusion they came to. It means that it's true because they're just so talented at hiding things. Neocons almost broke the Iran-Contra scandal, almost broke Reagan's presidency, and that should have finished them off in the Republican Party. For years and years, I've just wondered what kind of blackmail material they have against the Republicans. Jonathan Pohl, yes, a pickaxe broke off in Trotsky's skull. Yes, I meant back in the day. I don't know. I mean, there were people who, if you were still a communist in 1968, the invasion of Prague outraged you so much, or the invasion of Hungary outraged you so much, or what, in 1950, Khrushchev's secret speech outraged you so much? I guess you weren't paying, much attention to the world, or you didn't care much about mass murder if you were still a communist then. Okay. What else do we have here? What e-reader do you use? Asked Picasso 88. Let me get it. I'll be right back. It's got metal in there. And it is a Kobo. And, well, you can see how big it is. And you can see so the quality of it, I suppose. I've had it for, 3 or 4 years? quite pleased with it. For some reason, it stopped working once, and it started working again. Kobo was there's a monopoly, a bookstore chain in Canada. It was led by this woman called Heather Reisman, and she decided, I suppose, to rival the Kindle. She arranged for this product to be made, but it was sold off to the Japanese some years ago. I bought it at some discount place through the internet called Liquidation World or something. It was $50 for the e-reader. So that was a pretty good deal, I'd say. Pal Picasso 88 says, I'll bet that most people on the dissident right started off as libertarians. I did. I was a neocon as well in the 1970s. To be fair, if you look at magazines published in the 1970s, like the American Spectator, or the Alternative, as it was originally called, the neocons were not, at that time, exclusively concerned with Israel, the Middle East, and war. The neocons, people like Daniel Bell, Irving Kristol, people who had intelligent men who'd given a lot of thought to social conditions in the United States. Jonathan Paul says 1956 was the 20th Party Congress speech in February and the invasion of Hungary in November. Yeah. And just a word to the Ukrainians with regard to Hungary. As Ron Paul points out, the United States shamelessly pushed Hungarians through the Radio Liberty to revolt against their communist masters, and when it happened, Eisenhower sat on his hands despite piteous pleas from the Hungarians. Grant's birth name was Robert Ciro Giganti, says Glib Medley. Robert Stack was an Italian, and of course I'd grown up seeing him on the Untouchables. And when I found out he was Italian, I was rather shocked, because I remember I saw some episodes, the Untouchables, but Robert Stack's character, Elliot Ness, in that show would refer to Italians as spaghetti benders, which is kind of offensive, isn't it? Halper says the smarter commies wised up after Molotov-Ribbentrop. Yes, exactly. I mean, obviously I wasn't alive at the time, but I've seen the coverage, including the famous David Lowe cartoon on the Evening Standard. This is absolutely shocking to people that the communists, until the invasion in June of 1941, the communists everywhere in the world were Hitler's cheerleaders. And they accused those who thought that Hitler must be stopped as being imperialist warmongers. Radio Liberty, yeah, you're right, Professor Paul. Radio Liberty was for the USSR proper. Radio Free Europe was for Central Europe, including the Baltics. Does this still exist? These radio networks? That horrible Russian lesbian woman was in charge of one of those stations not that long ago. Jim Smith says, KMD, did you catch where William Bill Kristol just a couple of weeks ago not only came out in favor of D.C. statehood, but also statehood for Cuba once it became free? Yes, I did see that. No. What makes anyone think that the Cubans want to be run by the United States? I don't. So all these people left Cuba. I reviewed Tom Wolfe's Back to Blood a couple of weeks ago, and just this, okay, you left Cuba, you made your choice, you're supposed to be Americans now, so why is everything in South Florida about Cuba and how much you hate the Castro family? Pick a side, and it seemed to be these people, or their parents, or even their grandparents, picked a side. They didn't want to stay in Cuba. Jonathan Paul says, yes, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty were merged and still exist in Budapest, where they still receive U.S. funding. Their archives are frequently cited in PhD theses I come across. Yes, that book, what was it, Legacy of Ashes, about the CIA by Timothy Weiner. Just appalling stuff on the record about what Radio Free Europe was broadcasting to the Hungarians. Just a pure incitement, with promises that Americans would defend them. It's just one of the most shameful episodes, I think, in American diplomatic history. Okay, let's talk about the Derek Chauvin trial. Oh, yes, you may have seen the Commissioner of Police on TV. This is from Legal Insurrection by Andrew Branca. Today's court proceedings brought us a mere 3 states' witnesses. The first was the emergency room physician who treated Floyd and whose testimony did literally nothing to diminish the theory that Floyd died of impaired respiratory function induced by fentanyl overdose. Like every witness to date, Dr. Langenfeld's testimony had the appearance of being compelling right up until it was subject to the rest of the story on cross-examination. Much of the same could be said of what might be referred to as today's star witness, Minneapolis Police Chief Madaria Arradondo. Chief Arradondo gave the prosecution the headline quote they'd certainly prepared for effectively. Chauvin's neck restraint was outside MPD policy, period. But again, much of the apparent power of this quote was gutted on cross-examination by Nelson. The fact that the media will only cover direct questioning, however, and will substantively ignore cross-examination has real implications for race relations in America generally and for urban infrastructure in the immediate aftermath of this case. I like that phrase, urban infrastructure. Yes, the media wants a race war. So let's hear what the prosecution has to say, but let's not hear what the defense has to say. Now, this fellow, Madaria Arradondo, oh, yes, he's really got the backs of his officers. No, he doesn't. And he's a creep. He's an AA creep. I don't know what it is about Minneapolis, but this fellow only got his job because a crazy woman called Janae Harteau was a police chief beforehand. And just look this woman up. She's just this crazy lesbian. And yeah, but they get this guy, the new fellow. Now, how did he get to the top? Okay. He got to the top by suing the police department. That's how. This is from Wikipedia. A 5th-generation Minnesota resident, Arradondo joined the MPD in 1989 as a patrol officer in the 4th Precinct and worked his way up through the police ranks until he was named the inspector for the 1st Precinct. In 2007, he and 4 other African-American officers sued the department, alleging discrimination in promotions, pay, and discipline. The lawsuit was settled by the city for $740,000. And in December 2012, Arradondo was promoted to the head of the Internal Affairs Unit, responsible for investigation of allegations of officer misconduct. We see this all over police forces in Canada, the United States, in Britain, that minorities sue, claiming they're so wonderful at their jobs, they should have been promoted again and again and again. They should have got vast pay increases, but they weren't. And this is the result of racial discrimination. It doesn't really have to be proved because, it's true. He wasn't promoted. And since by his own account, he is just such an exemplary police officer, well, then that must mean racial discrimination. And once they start playing this game, essentially the Minneapolis Police Department had no choice but to keep promoting him until he became police chief, because he's already demonstrated once racial discrimination against the department to the tune of a settlement of $740,000. So he has to go to the top. It's that simple. He's got to go to the top. Yes, suppressio veri, they call it. This is from Jonathan Turley. I previously wrote that the key to conviction in the Derek Chauvin trial and avoiding a cascading failure in all 4 cases of the autopsy findings and the role of drugs, including fentanyl, in the body of George Floyd. Prosecutors are now asking the jury to effectively dismiss the findings of the only official autopsy in the case and insist, contrary to those findings, that Floyd died from asphyxia or lack of oxygen. Some new disclosures may make that claim more difficult for the prosecution. Last week, Special Prosecutor Jerry Blackwell admitted to jurors that Hennepin County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Andrew Baker pointed to cardiac arrest as Floyd's cause of death. However, he insisted the state would prove that that was not a fatal heart event, but asphyxiation. It's a bold move since it could invite reasonable doubt on the cause of death. The question is whether a case of manslaughter could have been advanced without the need of opposing the state's own coroner on such findings. The failure of Chauvin to respond to a medical emergency speaks more to manslaughter than murder, but it could be framed consistently with these findings. Instead, the prosecution has asked the jury to effectively reject the coroner's findings, a risky maneuver. When called to the scene due to Floyd allegedly passing counterfeit money, Floyd denied using drugs, but later said that he was hooping or taking drugs. The autopsy did not conclude that Floyd died from asphyxiation, although a family pathologist made that finding. Rather, it found cardiopulmonary arrest while being restrained by law enforcement officials. The state's criminal complaint against Chauvin said the autopsy revealed no physical findings that supported diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. Floyd had underlying health conditions, including coronary artery disease and hypertensive heart disease. He was also COVID-19 positive. Andrew Baker, Hennepin County's chief medical examiner, strongly suggested that the primary cause was a huge amount of fentanyl in Floyd's system. Fentanyl at 11 ng over milliliters, this was higher than a chronic pain patient. If he were found dead at home alone and no other apparent causes, this could be acceptable to call an overdose. Deaths have been certified with levels of 3, and his level was 11. Baker also told investigators that the autopsy revealed no physical evidence suggesting Floyd died of asphyxiation. The toxicology report on Floyd's blood also noted that in fatalities from fentanyl, blood concentrations are variable and have been reported as low as 3 ng over milliliter. Floyd had almost 4 times the level of fentanyl considered potentially lethal. Floyd's lungs were 2 to 3 times the normal size and filled with fluid. Pulmonary edema is a condition caused by excess fluid in the lungs and is symptomatic of an opioid overdose, according to the Mayo Clinic. However, it should be noted that the Mayo Clinic report also addresses non-heart related, non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema and negative pressure pulmonary edema, which could be used to support the prosecution's theory. And, just absolutely bizarre story about 2 brothers in Texas from Bangladesh who killed 4 family members and then themselves, largely because they thought that The Office, the U.S. version of Ricky Gervais's The Office, had jumped the shark. Now, again, I am not making this up. Apparently there are not enough crazy people in America that America feels the need to import them from countries such as Bangladesh. Let's see, Farhan Tawhid. What are they referring to him by his first name? As if he's a beloved figure or he's our pal. In a rambling 12-page note initially linked to his Instagram page, Farhan Tawhid, 19, said that he and his 21-year-old brother, Tanvir Tawhid, were reunited in manic depression and all-day TV watching sessions. The first and most important show we watched was The Office, Farhan wrote. In a note that started, "Hey everyone, I killed myself and my family." The Steve Carell comedy was one of the 4 very important issues I encountered throughout my life, Farhan claimed. He ranted at length about how the show should have ended when Steve Carell's character, Michael Scott, left, because eventually it went shit, complaining about plot and character developments that enraged him. I wonder if these boys were using marijuana I'll just ask that question because so many of them in these types of incidents, they appear to be. Okay, I think that Herbert Aptheker joined the Communist Party when the Nazi-Soviet pact was made, while other communists were disillusioned into leaving it. And I think that, okay, I should mention this. There was this young woman, she was 14 years old at the time, who became famous on Dr. Phil's show or whatever because of her weird pronunciation. Danielle Bregoli, Cash Me Outside. And then later she started calling herself Bad Baby, was spelled with superfluous H's. And she now claims that she has made $1 million in just 6 hours after launching her OnlyFans account. Maybe this is what's going to pull us out of our economic tailspin. Everyone will have an OnlyFans account. Of course, she claims to have made $1.09 million. Yeah, anyone can claim that. This woman is now hideously disfigured with tattoos and unfortunate hair color choices. I suppose in addition, she has the kind of beauty that curdles quickly. But she is legal now, and I suppose that's what counts. Yes, damn, y'all wasted y'all money to see a girl that just turned 18, commented one follower. Well, you win the internet. Of course, there's also the possibility, that now being legal, that she could have lost money in other ways. I don't know. So I think I'm going to leave it on that bombshell. And let's have a final look at the chat. Which season does he think it jumped the shark? Ed Helms. That guy is just unbearable. Absolutely unbearable. When we all were supposed to hate him because he was unbearable, even more unbearable than Michael Scott, that worked well enough. But no, Michael Scott was turned into a hero, so we have to have Ed Helms turned into a hero as well. Oh, I don't know. What season was it that they were doing gay shipping for Oscar in Winnipeg? Yeah. And I don't know, 4 good seasons? 4.5 good seasons? Something like that. Buddy says Marie Osmond is very well preserved. She fronts 2 commercial campaigns, one for the Publishers Clearinghouse and another one for some dieting system. And I have to say that yes, she is very well preserved. Okay, OnlyFans saves the economy, says Dan. The Uber OnlyFans economy. Okay. So what's coming up on the show Thursday, Theater Thursday? I'm going to be discussing Andrew Patterson's 2019 film, The Vast of Night. April 15th, I'm going to be discussing Adam Curtis's documentary from this year, Can't Get You Out of My Head. And on the Book Club Friday, as previously mentioned, I'm going to be discussing P.D. James's dystopian novel, which is set in 2021, called The Children of Men. And on April the 16th, I'll be discussing Stephen Sukup's The Dictatorship of Woke Capital. And once again, on April the 12th, I will be presenting a primer to Kraut Rock. And the week after that, I will discuss the topic classical crossover, threat or menace. I shall be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for listening, tuning in. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to make a contribution to this live stream, greatly appreciated at this particular juncture in my life. My PayPal account is attached to Kevin_Grace at hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, money can be sent to the website, not the website, to the live stream via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.